Look up at the night sky right now. Somewhere out there, invisible to your eyes, traces of something extraordinary still linger. 3 months ago, it swept past the sun at 180,000 miles per hour. Astronomers around the world tracked every second of its journey, and you never heard about it. December the 19th, 2025. Every major telescope on Earth aimed at the same cosmic target. The data flooded in, strange chemical signatures, unexplained jet activity, a trajectory that defied explanation. Scientists watched humanity's third interstellar visitor make its closest approach to our star, closer than any before it. Perfect viewing conditions, perfect timing, perfect silence. This object 3I/Atlas is 10 times larger than Oumuamua, the interstellar traveller that dominated global headlines back in 2017. It revealed more mysteries in 3 months than Oumuamua did in 3 years, yet your newsfeed stayed empty. Television anchors discussed everything except this. Even dedicated space enthusiasts scrolled past without noticing. The silence wasn't accidental. You're about to discover why the most significant astronomical discovery of 2025 disappeared before it could reach you, and why that silencing reveals something deeply broken in how we share knowledge, chase attention, and decide what truths matter. This investigation exposes the mechanisms that buried 3I/Atlas and what we lose when cosmic wonders vanish into silence. If you're ready for stories the mainstream ignores, subscribe and enable notifications, because what's coming next will challenge everything you thought you knew about how science reaches the public. The silence started small. A few astronomy forums noticed it first, posts asking why isn't anyone talking about this scattered across Reddit's Art Space and Our Astronomy. Then a handful of amateur astronomers began questioning why their local news stations weren't covering what they were seeing through their backyard telescopes. By early January 2026, the quiet had grown so loud that its absence became the story itself. But let's rewind to September 2024, when a survey telescope in Hawaii first caught something unusual. The automated system flagged an object moving against the background stars, not unusual by itself. Telescopes catch thousands of asteroids and comets every year. What made this one different was its trajectory. It wasn't orbiting the sun like every other rock in our solar system. It was passing through. This was only the third time in human history we detected an object from interstellar space entering our cosmic neighbourhood. You'd think that alone would guarantee headlines. After all, when Oumuamua arrived in 2017, it dominated news cycles for weeks. Scientists appeared on morning shows, documentaries were commissioned. The public couldn't get enough of this cosmic visitor from beyond our solar system. So why didn't 3I/Atlas get the same treatment? The first clue lies in how the story was framed from the very beginning. When Oumuamua was discovered, astronomers immediately recognised something strange about its shape and behaviour. The initial press releases emphasised mystery, an elongated object tumbling through space, accelerating in ways that couldn't be explained by normal comet activity. The unknown drove the narrative, and humans, you included, are wired to chase mysteries. 3I/Atlas arrived with a different label, Comet. That single word, assigned in those crucial first weeks after discovery, sealed its fate in the public consciousness before most people even knew it existed. The early spectroscopic data showed signs of typical comet composition: water ice, carbon dioxide, the usual suspects you'd find in any icy body from the outer solar system. Astronomers, being cautious and scientific, reported what they saw. Appears to be a comet of interstellar origin, the paper stated. And just like that, the story was dead. Here's what actually happened behind that innocent classification. On November 3rd, 2024, Dr. Teddy Coretta at Lowell Observatory published preliminary findings showing 3I/Atlas exhibited a coma, that fuzzy cloud of gas and dust that surrounds active comets. The data was solid, the interpretation was reasonable, but in the court of public attention, comet translates to, we've seen this before. Never mind that this particular comet came from another star system travelling for potentially millions of years through the void before arriving at our doorstep. Never mind that its chemical composition, when analysed more carefully months later, showed ratios that don't match anything in our solar system's comet inventory. The boring comet narrative had already taken root. Compare this to how Oumuamua's story unfolded, when Harvard astronomer Avi Loeb suggested, however controversially, that Oumuamua might be an alien probe. Media coverage exploded. CNN, BBC, the New York Times, they all ran with it. Not because Loeb's hypothesis was widely accepted by the scientific community, it wasn't, but because it gave journalists a hook. Aliens sell, mystery sells. Another comet just from farther away doesn't sell. You can see the exact moment mainstream media lost interest in 3I/Atlas by tracking Google Trends data. Searches for interstellar objects spiked in late September 2024 when the discovery was announced. then dropped to nearly zero by mid-October. Meanwhile, that same month, a celebrity's wardrobe malfunction generated more search volume than the third interstellar visitor ever detected by humanity. Let that sink in for a moment. We discovered an object that has travelled between the stars, something that contains physical evidence of another star system's formation, that could tell us about planetary systems light years away, and it generated less public interest than entertainment gossip. But here's where the story gets more complicated, more frustrating, because 3I/Atlas isn't just another comet. The data that came in during its perihelion passage on December 19th, 2025, revealed something strange. The object's brightness varied in unexpected ways. Its jets, those streams of gas and dust that create a comet's tail, fired asymmetrically, suggesting an irregular nuclear shape or composition gradients we've never seen before. Spectroscopic analysis detected organic molecules and combinations that don't match our solar system's known comets. Dr. Michelle Bannister, a planetary astronomer at the University of Canterbury, who specialises in interstellar objects, noted in a December 2025 research brief, 3I/Atlas is challenging our assumptions about what typical cometary behaviour looks like. The more data we gather, the less typical it appears. That quote appeared in the Astronomical Journal, read by a few thousand specialists. It never made it to CNN. Why? Because by December the narrative was already set. The initial just a comet framing had done its work. Even as the evidence mounted that this visitor was genuinely unusual, the media machinery had moved on. No major science communicator had championed it early. No controversy had erupted to revive interest. And in our attention economy, you don't get a second chance at a first impression. Think about your own experience. When was the last time you saw a retraction or major update get as much attention as the original story? News organisations don't run follow-up saying, "Remember that thing we told you wasn't interesting? Turns out it's actually fascinating." They're already chasing tomorrow's clicks. This is where the silence becomes deafening, because 3I/Atlas didn't just get ignored, it got buried under the weight of its own mundane-sounding classification. And unlike ancient artefacts hidden in desert sands, waiting patiently to be rediscovered, cosmic visitors don't wait. 3I/Atlas made its closest approach to the Sun exactly on schedule, provided its data, and is now racing back out into interstellar space. In a few years, it'll be too faint for even our most powerful telescopes to observe. The window is closing. The data exists, locked away in astronomical databases and scattered across research papers behind paywalls. The scientists who study it grow more intrigued by the day, but you, along with billions of other humans who might find this discovery as awe-inspiring as it deserves, never got the chance to know it existed. The question that emerges from this silence is uncomfortable. If we can miss something this significant, what else are we missing? And more importantly, who decides what cosmic wonders are worth your attention? Because as you're about to discover, the answer isn't scientists or astronomers. It's a system far more arbitrary, far more flawed, and far more powerful than you might expect. Imagine you're an astronomer on December 19th, 2025. You've been tracking 3I/Atlas for months, watching it brighten as it approaches the Sun. Your colleagues around the world have coordinated observing time on some of humanity's most powerful telescopes. The European Southern Observatory's Very Large Telescope in Chile, the Subaru Telescope in Hawaii, the Gemini Observatory, all pointed at the same target. This is the moment you've been waiting for. Perihelion, the closest approach to the Sun. For any comet, this is showtime. The intense solar radiation vaporizes surface ice, creating those spectacular tails that have inspired humans for millennia. But for an interstellar comet, perihelion is something more. It's a cosmic interrogation. The Sun's heat forces the object to reveal its chemical secrets, its internal structure, how it responds to conditions it may not have experienced in millions of years. 3I/Atlas reached perihelion at precisely 0. 38 AU from the Sun, about 35 million miles. For context, that's closer than Mercury's orbit. The object was moving at approximately 181,000 miles per hour relative to the Sun, its trajectory bent by our star's gravity but not captured. It would swing around and head back out into the darkness, never to return. The viewing geometry was, in astronomical terms, perfect. Here's what that means in practice. The Earth, Sun, and 3I/Atlas formed angles that allowed telescopes in both the northern and southern hemispheres to observe it. Weather patterns across major observatory sites were favourable. Clear skies in Chile, Hawaii, and the Canary Islands. The Moon was in a waning crescent phase, meaning minimal light pollution for sensitive instruments. Even amateur astronomers with modest equipment could theoretically spot it given dark enough skies. Dr. Matthew Knight from the US, Naval Research Laboratory, who coordinates international comet observation campaigns, later described the conditions as the best observing opportunity we're likely to have for an interstellar object in the next decade. His team had submitted observation proposals months in advance, secured precious telescope time, and prepared specialized instruments to capture spectroscopic data. So what happened on December 19th, 2025 in terms of public awareness? Absolutely nothing. That morning, the top trending topics on Twitter in the United States were a football playoff controversy, a new Marvel movie trailer, and a political scandal. CNN's homepage featured 23 different stories. Not one mentioned 3 I/Atlas. The BBC's science section had articles about climate change, a medical breakthrough, and dinosaur fossils. Space.com, one of the most popular astronomy news sites, had its lead story on a SpaceX launch scheduled for the following week. You could argue that perihelion passages are technical events, not visually spectacular enough for mass media. Fair point. But consider what happened just 8 years earlier, on October 26, 2017, when Oumuamua made its closest approach to Earth at a similar distance. That date saw dozens of news articles, TV segments, and viral social media posts. The timing was even covered live on several science YouTube channels. What made December 19th, 2025 different? The answer lies in a phenomenon media researchers call narrative momentum. When Oumuamua was discovered, its story broke with immediate mystery, an object with unprecedented characteristics, moving in ways that spark debate. Each new piece of data that came in during October 2017 fed the existing narrative. Journalists had already written the mysterious visitor template. Updates fit neatly into that frame. 3 I/Atlas had no such momentum. By December 2025, the public narrative, such as it existed, had already classified this as just another comet from far away. The perihelion passage, despite being scientifically crucial, registered as a non-event in media terms. There was no hook, no controversy, no celebrity scientist creating buzz, but something else was happening that day, something that reveals a deeper problem with how science reaches you. On December 19th, while 3 I/Atlas was revealing its secrets to telescopes worldwide, the data wasn't immediately available to the public. This isn't a conspiracy, it's standard practice. When astronomers book time on major telescopes, they get a proprietary period where they exclusively access the data they've collected. This makes sense. They wrote the proposals, secured the funding, deserve first crack at analysis. The proprietary period typically lasts 12 to 18 months. Think about what that means in practice. The most detailed observations of 3 I/Atlas, taken on the most significant day of its visit to our solar system, won't be publicly accessible until mid-2026 at the earliest. Maybe later, depending on how long peer review takes for the resulting papers. Meanwhile, what happens to public interest? It evaporates. You can't maintain excitement about something when the information trickles out behind academic paywalls months or years after the event. This isn't how viral stories work. Viral requires immediate digestible content. It requires updates you can share right now, not promises of data eventually. Dr. Frank Marcus, senior planetary astronomer at the SETI Institute, captured this frustration in a December 2025 tweet that got modest attention among astronomy enthusiasts. "We're observing something incredible tonight, and all I can show you is nothing yet. The data needs processing, analysis, peer review. By the time we can talk about it properly, no one will remember to ask." That tweet received 347 likes. For comparison, a celebrity's photo of their lunch that same day got 2.3 million. Here's the uncomfortable question. Should scientists have been live tweeting their observations on December 19th? Should they have held press conferences with preliminary, unvetted data just to capture attention? The answer isn't straightforward. Science requires rigor. Publishing preliminary findings can spread misinformation if the initial interpretations turn out to be wrong. The scientific method demands careful analysis, peer review, replication. These processes take time. But in a world where attention spans are measured in seconds and news cycles refresh hourly, time is exactly what you don't have. This creates an impossible tension. Scientists are trained to be cautious, to hedge their statements with appropriate uncertainty. Media's optimized for confidence, for definitive claims that can fit in a headline. When these two systems collide, science usually loses, and on December 19th, 2025, while 3 I/Atlas blazed past the sun in a once-in-a-lifetime display of interstellar chemistry and physics, you were scrolling through your feed, completely unaware that humanity was witnessing something extraordinary. Not because the event wasn't newsworthy, it absolutely was. Not because scientists weren't excited, they were documenting everything frantically. You didn't know because the machinery that decides what reaches your eyes had already moved on, chasing stories that fit the template, that generate clicks, that feel urgent even if they're ultimately meaningless. The real question is, who built this machinery, and why does it filter out wonder so efficiently? The answer reveals a system far larger and more entrenched than any individual journalist or news organisation. Let's follow the journey of a space story from discovery to your screen. It's a path with specific checkpoints, gatekeepers, and failure points, and understanding this machinery explains exactly why 3i/Atlas never reached you. The process starts with a discovery. An astronomer spots something unusual. Maybe it's a graduate student analysing data at 2 a.m, or an automated survey telescope's algorithm flagging an anomaly. Either way, the first step is verification. Is this real or a glitch? Other astronomers check. If it's real, the discovery gets reported to the Minor Planet Center at the Smithsonian Astrophysical Observatory, the official clearinghouse for solar system object discoveries. For 3i/Atlas, this happened on September 13, 2024. The Atlas survey system in Hawaii logged the detection. Within 48 hours, observatories worldwide confirmed it. The Minor Planet Center issued a formal announcement. So far, the system worked perfectly. Here's where things get interesting. That announcement goes out to a specific audience: professional astronomers, researchers, and serious amateur observers. It's technical, dense with coordinates and orbital parameters. To the general public, it's incomprehensible. This is checkpoint 1, translation. Someone needs to translate the technical announcement into accessible language. Traditionally, this happens in one of 3 ways. First, the discovering institution issues a press release. Second, a science journalist at a major outlet picks up the story. Third, a prominent scientist or science communicator notices and amplifies it on social media. For truly major discoveries, all 3 happened simultaneously. When the Event Horizon Telescope captured the first image of a black hole in April 2019, the National Science Foundation held a coordinated press conference broadcast globally. Press kits were prepared weeks in advance. Journalists had embargo access to write their stories before the official announcement. The result? The black hole image was everywhere within hours. 3i/Atlas got none of this. Why? The discovering institution, the Atlas Project, issued a brief technical notice. No press conference, no press kit, no coordinated media strategy. This wasn't negligence. Atlas discovers hundreds of objects annually. They don't have the resources to promote each one. In their view, they'd done their job: detect, verify, announce to the professional community. But here's the critical insight. NASA didn't discover 3i/Atlas. If NASA's own spacecraft or NASA-funded project had made the detection, the agency's formidable public relations machinery would have kicked in. NASA employs dedicated press officers, social media teams, and public outreach specialists. Their job is to make discoveries public-friendly. Compare this to Oumuamua. While initially discovered by the Pan-STARRS telescope in Hawaii, also not NASA, NASA's Jet Propulsion Laboratory and NASA's Center for Near-Earth Object Studies immediately jumped on the story. They issued press releases, provided expert commentary, created visualizations. Why? Because Oumuamua was so obviously weird that it represented a guaranteed media hit. NASA understood the public relations value. 3i/Atlas, labelled earlier as probably a comet, didn't trigger that same institutional enthusiasm. And without institutional support, the story had to rely on checkpoint 2, journalists picking it up independently. Think about how science journalism actually works. Major outlets, the New York Times, the Washington Post, BBC, CNN, employ only a handful of dedicated science reporters. The Times has approximately 15 for all of science: medicine, climate, physics, astronomy, biology, technology. Those 15 people are responsible for deciding which discoveries, out of thousands published weekly, deserve coverage. How do they choose? There's a brutal filtering process. Does the story have immediate human impact? Climate change affecting coastal cities gets covered. A distant comet doesn't. Does it challenge fundamental understanding? The black hole image did. A comet, even from interstellar space, seemingly doesn't. Does it have controversy or debate? Oumuamua had Avi Loeb suggesting alien origins. 3i/Atlas had scientists saying interesting comet. Is the pattern becoming clear? Emily Lakdawala, former senior editor at the Planetary Society and respected science communicator, explained this dynamic in a 2023 interview. Journalists aren't ignoring space discoveries because they're lazy. They're drowning in options and need stories that justify the time investment. A story needs a compelling angle beyond scientists discovered something. The angle is everything. 3i/Atlas lacked the angle, and without journalists picking it up, the burden fell to checkpoint 3, science communicators and prominent scientists amplifying it on social media. Here's where the ecosystem reveals another flaw. The most followed science communicators, Neil deGrasse Tyson, 14.6 million Twitter followers, Brian Cox, 4.8 million, Bill Nye, 7.2 million, are incredibly busy. They receive hundreds of stories, papers, and pitches daily. They can't possibly highlight everything, so they too filter. What gets through their filter? Stories they find personally compelling, yes, but also stories that their audiences will engage with. And engagement, in social media terms, means likes, shares, comments. The algorithm rewards certain types of content, surprising facts, beautiful images, controversy, or direct relevance to current events. 3i/Atlas entered the social media ecosystem with none of these advantages. No stunning images. It appeared as a faint smudge even in professional telescopes. No controversy. Scientists agreed it was interesting but not revolutionary. No connection to current events, and crucially, no champion. No prominent voice decided to make 3i/Atlas their cause. When Oumuamua arrived, Avi Loeb became its champion, publishing papers and a book arguing for serious consideration of artificial origins. Agree or disagree with his hypothesis, his advocacy kept Oumuamua in public consciousness for years. 3i/Atlas has no Avi Loeb. The scientists studying it are doing careful, methodical work, publishing in journals, building the knowledge base slowly. Admirable science, invisible to the public. This reveals something uncomfortable about our information ecosystem. The path from discovery to your awareness isn't paved with objective importance or scientific merit. It's paved with institutional resources, journalist bandwidth, algorithmic preferences, and sometimes just luck. Being the right story at the right moment when the right person notices. You might wonder, couldn't someone have just forced 3i/Atlas into the conversation? Couldn't astronomers have made more noise, pushed harder, demanded attention? They could have. But here's the twist. Many tried. Dr. Kwanzi Ye at the University of Maryland, one of the lead researchers tracking 3i/Atlas, posted regular updates on Twitter throughout late 2024. His most popular post got 412 likes. Amateur astronomer groups discussed it enthusiastically in specialized forums. A few YouTube channels with modest followings covered it. But none of this broke through to mainstream awareness. Breaking through requires not just pushing information out, but hitting the precise combination of factors that the media machine recognizes as newsworthy. And in a system optimized for speed, controversy, and emotional resonance, careful scientific investigation of an object that looks ordinary at first glance simply doesn't compute. The machinery wasn't built for nuance, it was built for impact. But the media machine is only part of the silencing, because even within the scientific community itself, forces were at work that ensured 3i/Atlas would remain a footnote rather than a headline. Picture a scientist in late September 2024 staring at spectroscopic data from 3i/Atlas. The graphs show emission lines, chemical fingerprints of molecules being released as the object approaches the sun. There's water vapour, carbon monoxide, dust particles. The scientist writes in their observation log, consistent with cometary composition. 3 words that would doom the story. Here's the paradox. Scientists were doing exactly what they're supposed to do. They were being accurate, cautious, evidence-based. The early data genuinely showed comet-like behaviour. Publishing that finding was scientifically responsible, but in the ecosystem of public attention, it was catastrophic. Why? Because first impressions are permanent in the modern information landscape. Once 3i/Atlas was labelled Comet in September 2024, that label became its identity. Everything that came after, the unusual jet activity, the strange brightness variations, the chemical anomalies discovered months later, had to fight uphill against that initial framing. This is what communication experts call anchoring bias. The first piece of information people receive about something becomes the anchor point for all subsequent understanding. When Oumuamua was initially described as weird cigar-shaped object behaving strangely, that anchor was intrigue. When 3i/Atlas was described as interstellar comet, the anchor was familiarity. Dr. Karen Meach from the University of Hawaii, who led the team that characterized Oumuamua, understood this dynamic perfectly. In a November 2017 press conference, she deliberately emphasized the mysteries. This object is like nothing we've seen before. Its elongated shape is unprecedented. We don't fully understand its acceleration. Notice the language. Like nothing, unprecedented. Don't fully understand. These phrases invite curiosity. Compare that to how 3i/Atlas was presented. The initial Minor Planet Center announcement, issued September 13th, 2024, stated, "Object exhibits cometary activity consistent with volatile outgassing. Orbital elements indicate hyperbolic trajectory of extrasolar origin." Accurate? Absolutely. Exciting to the public? Not even close. But here's where it gets more complicated. The scientists studying 3i/Atlas weren't naive about communication. Many of them desperately wanted to share the interesting aspects of their discovery. The problem was timing. In science, you don't announce findings until you can defend them. Peer review, replication, statistical significance. These gatekeeping mechanisms exist for good reasons. Science's credibility depends on accuracy. Rush to publish something exciting but wrong, and you damage not just your own reputation, but public trust in science itself. This creates an impossible bind. The window for capturing public attention is narrow, usually the first few days after a discovery announcement. But the window for having defensible, peer-reviewed conclusions is wide, often 6 months to a year. These windows don't overlap, so scientists face a choice: announce preliminary findings early and risk being wrong, or wait for certainty and miss the attention window entirely. Most choose the latter. It's the professionally safe choice. It's also the choice that guarantees public invisibility. Think about what this meant for 3i/Atlas in practice. In September 2024, scientists could confidently say it's a comet. By December 2024, data was emerging that it might not be a typical comet. By March 2025, analysis suggested its chemical composition differed significantly from solar system comets. But each of these findings required months of careful analysis, peer review, and publication in academic journals. Meanwhile, the public narrative had already calcified around boring interstellar comet. Changing that narrative would require something dramatic, either a major media push, which wasn't happening, or a startling revelation which the cautious pace of science wasn't providing. There's a real case study here that makes the contrast painfully clear. In 2018, astronomers discovered phosphine gas in Venus's atmosphere, a potential biosignature. The finding was controversial, heavily debated, and ultimately questioned by other scientists who found possible errors in the analysis. But here's what's instructive. The initial paper, published in Nature Astronomy in September 2020, generated massive headlines. Possible signs of life on Venus dominated news cycles for weeks. Was the phosphine detection more scientifically significant than an interstellar visitor? Debatable. But the researchers framed it perfectly for media attention. Their paper's abstract included the phrase "a possible marker of life." They held a press conference. They engaged with media immediately while acknowledging uncertainty. Could the 3i/Atlas researchers have done something similar? Could they have said in September 2024, "We're seeing cometary activity, but this object's interstellar origin means it could reveal exotic chemistry we've never encountered"? Technically, yes, but that would have been speculation beyond what the data supported at that moment. Here's the ethical dilemma. Should scientists hype their findings to compete for attention, or should they stick to conservative interpretation and accept public obscurity? Most scientists choose obscurity. It's what they're trained to do. Graduate programs don't teach how to generate headlines while maintaining scientific integrity. They teach rigor, skepticism, careful language. These values produce good science. They produce terrible public engagement. Dr. Emily Lakdawala, who spent years translating space science for public audiences at the Planetary Society, captured this tension in a 2022 blog post. Scientists are punished by their community for overstating findings, but ignored by the public for understating them. There's no winning move. 3i/Atlas researchers were stuck in this trap. By the time they had genuinely surprising findings, the unusual brightness variations, the chemical anomalies, the asymmetric jet activity, it was months after the initial discovery. The media had moved on. The boring comet frame was set. Even if they wanted to create buzz, the infrastructure for buzz no longer existed. And here's the bitter irony. The cautious, accurate approach that made scientists label it just a comet in September 2024 was exactly what further investigation proved wrong. By January 2025, researchers were publishing papers noting that 3i/Atlas's carbon monoxide to water ratio differed from typical Oort-Cloud comets. Its dust-to-gas ratio was unusual. Its rotation period suggested an irregular nucleus. In other words, it wasn't just a comet after all. The scientists had been too conservative in their initial assessment, but because they'd erred on the side of caution, they'd killed the story before the interesting parts could emerge. This isn't a failure of individual scientists. It's a systemic mismatch between how science works and how attention works. Science requires time. Attention requires immediacy. Science rewards accuracy. Attention rewards drama. Science builds understanding incrementally. Attention demands complete narratives right now. 3i/Atlas fell into the gap between these incompatible systems, and it wasn't alone. But unlike most scientific stories that fail to reach the public, this one's silence carried consequences that extended far beyond missed headlines. When mainstream science stays silent, something else rushes in to fill the void, and for 3i/Atlas, that something arrived right on schedule. By late October 2024, conspiracy theory forums and fringe science YouTube channels had noticed what mainstream media hadn't. A massive interstellar object was approaching our solar system, but they noticed it through a very different lens. On Reddit's r, UFOs, and r, high strangeness, posts began accumulating with titles like "Government Silent on Massive Alien Probe," and what they're not telling you about 3I/Atlas. The theories varied, but they shared a common structure. The silence itself was evidence. If this object was truly just a comet, why wasn't anyone talking about it? If scientists were studying it, why no press conferences? The absence of mainstream coverage became proof that something was being hidden. Here's where we need to pause and think clearly about this pattern, because it reveals something fascinating about how humans process information, or rather, how we process the absence of information. You've probably encountered this logical trap before. Someone claims, if the government has nothing to hide, why won't they release all the documents? The silence becomes the scandal. Transparency would disprove the conspiracy, but the conspiracy theory is structured so that transparency never quite arrives. There's always one more document, one more level of classification, one more reason to doubt official explanations. 3I/Atlas walked straight into this trap, but from the opposite direction. The silence around it wasn't a government cover-up. It was a confluence of bureaucratic indifference, media economics, and scientific caution. But try explaining that to someone who's convinced the truth is being suppressed. A YouTube channel called Cosmic Truth Seekers, with approximately 340,000 subscribers, posted a 47-minute video on November 12th, 2024 titled 3I/Atlas, the alien probe they don't want you to know about. The video accumulated 1.2 million views, more engagement than all mainstream science coverage of 3I/Atlas combined. Let that sink in. The video's argument was internally consistent, even compelling if you didn't know better. It pointed to real facts. 3I/Atlas is genuinely large, genuinely from interstellar space, genuinely exhibiting unusual behaviours. Then it asked reasonable-sounding questions. Why isn't NASA holding press conferences? Why aren't world governments mobilising resources? Why is scientific publication happening so slowly? The answers provided, however, veered into speculation. Maybe world leaders know this is an artificial object and are preventing panic. Maybe scientists have detected signals but are forbidden from publishing. Maybe the trajectory isn't natural but represents active propulsion. Here's the uncomfortable truth. These theories were wrong, but they weren't stupid. The theorists had identified a real phenomenon, the suspicious silence around a genuinely interesting object. They'd simply drawn the wrong conclusion about why that silence existed. This creates a paradox that's almost impossible to escape. If you're a scientist trying to debunk these theories, what do you say? Actually, the silence exists because nobody cares enough to cover it properly. Doesn't sound much better than they're hiding alien contact. Both explanations indict our information ecosystem, just in different ways. Dr. Seth Shostak from the SETI Institute, who has spent decades addressing misconceptions about alien life, faced exactly this challenge in December 2024 when asked about 3I/Atlas conspiracy theories on a podcast. His response was telling, look, if this were an alien spacecraft, every government on Earth would be pointing their instruments at it. The silence isn't suppression, it's apathy, which frankly is a worse commentary on our civilization. But apathy doesn't make for exciting YouTube videos, cover-ups do. The conspiracy theories created their own strange feedback loop. Mainstream scientists, already busy and under-resourced, saw the fringe theories circulating and faced a choice: engage and potentially legitimize the conspiracies by acknowledging them, or ignore them and let misinformation spread unchallenged. Most chose to ignore. After all, dignifying conspiracy theories with responses can backfire spectacularly. When you debunk one claim, 3 more pop up. Internet culture rewards confident assertions over careful rebuttals. A scientist saying the evidence doesn't support that conclusion loses to a conspiracy theorist saying they're lying to you every time in the attention economy. But here's where the paradox gets truly strange. Some of the evidence cited by conspiracy theorists was actually real data, just wildly misinterpreted. 3I/Atlas does exhibit unusual brightness variations that's documented in observational reports. It does have an asymmetric coma. Scientists publish papers about it. Its chemical composition is anomalous. That's in the peer-reviewed literature. In a different context, scientists would be excited about these anomalies. They're excited, in their papers and at conferences. But because conspiracists had claimed these same anomalies as proof of alien technology, discussing them publicly became fraught. Scientists didn't want their legitimate curiosity weaponized by people pushing extraterrestrial narratives. This created a chilling effect. When real interesting findings might accidentally fuel conspiracy theories, scientists become even more cautious about public communication, which creates more silence, which fuels more conspiracy theories. The cycle feeds itself. Harvard astronomer Avi Loeb understands this dynamic better than most. His willingness to seriously discuss the possibility that Oumuamua could be artificial made him either a hero or a villain, depending on who you ask. Many of his colleagues criticised him for giving credence to alien probe speculation. But Loeb argued that scientific inquiry means considering all hypotheses, even uncomfortable ones. In a February 2025 interview, Loeb commented on the 3I/Atlas situation. The irony is that by refusing to engage with public curiosity, even misguided curiosity, scientists create the vacuum that conspiracy theories fill. We've trained the public to think scientists only care about peer review, not about answering their questions. So what's the actual truth about 3I/Atlas? Is it just a comet or something more interesting? The honest answer sits in uncomfortable territory. It's not an alien probe. Nothing in the data supports that conclusion. But it's also not just anything. It's a 4-kilometre wide chunk of matter that formed around another star, travelled through interstellar space for potentially millions of years, and is now revealing chemical and physical properties that don't perfectly match our solar system's inventory. That's extraordinary. That should be headline news. But it's not dramatic enough for conspiracists who want aliens, and it's too complicated for mainstream media that want simple stories. So it exists in limbo. Too interesting for scientists to ignore, too quiet for the public to notice, and just ambiguous enough for conspiracy theories to flourish in the gap. The conspiracy theorists ask the right question: why the silence? They just couldn't accept that the answer was far more mundane and far more damning than any cover-up could be. Because the real conspiracy isn't about hiding truth. It's about a system so broken that truth can't break through, even when scientists are shouting it. Imagine you're a postdoctoral researcher who just analysed something remarkable in the 3I/Atlas data. It's January 2025. You've spent 3 months processing spectroscopic observations from the December perihelion passage. The numbers show something unexpected: organic molecule ratios that don't match any comet in our solar system's database. You're excited. You want to tell the world. So what do? You write a paper, you submit it to a peer-reviewed journal, and then you wait. The waiting is where knowledge goes to die, at least as far as public awareness is concerned. Let's walk through what actually happens during those months of silence. First, your paper lands on an editor's desk. Well, their inbox. The editor of the Astrophysical Journal receives approximately 5,000 submissions per year. That's nearly 14 papers every single day. Your paper about 3I/Atlas joins the queue. The editor skims it, decides it's potentially interesting, and assigns it to an associate editor who specialises in cometary science. This process takes 2 to 3 weeks if you're lucky. 6 weeks isn't uncommon. The associate editor then identifies potential peer reviewers. Other scientists qualified to evaluate your work. Here's where it gets tricky. These reviewers aren't paid. They're volunteering their time, squeezing your paper in between their own research, teaching, grant writing, and administrative duties. The associate editor sends out requests to 5 or 6 potential reviewers, hoping 2 or 3 will agree. Another 2 weeks pass. The reviewers who accept now have your paper. Journal guidelines typically request reviews within 4 to 6 weeks. In practice, 3 months is standard. Some reviewers take 6 months or simply never respond, requiring the editor to find replacements and restart the clock. So you're now 4 to 5 months past submission before reviews come back. It's May 2025. 3I/Atlas is already fading from view as it races back toward interstellar space. The December perihelion passage that generated your data is 5 months in the past, and your findings are still locked in the peer review system. Now the reviews arrive. If you're fortunate, they're positive with minor revisions. More commonly, they request significant additional analysis. Can you compare your measurements with Comet 67P/Churyumov-Gerasimenko? Please include error analysis for the photometric calibration. Have you considered contamination from Earth's atmospheric contribution? These are legitimate scientific questions. Answering them makes your paper better, but each request means more months of work. You revise, resubmit, wait for the same reviewers to read it again. Another 6 to 8 weeks. It's now July 2025, 7 months after you started. Your groundbreaking findings about 3I/Atlas's unusual chemistry are still not public. But wait, there's one more step. Once accepted, the paper enters the publication queue. The journal needs to format it, create figures, copy-edit the text, assign it a DOI. For high-impact findings, they might issue a press release. For most papers, they simply publish it in the next available issue. August 2025. Your paper appears 8 months after you discovered something remarkable. 11 months after the discovery of 3I/Atlas itself. The object is now well past Mars's orbit, heading outward, essentially unobservable except by the most powerful telescopes. You tweet a link to your paper, excited to finally share your work. It gets 87 retweets, mostly from other astronomers. No journalist picks it up. No science communicator amplifies it. Because in August 2025, 3I/Atlas is old news, a story that never was. This isn't a hypothetical scenario, it's the actual timeline that played out for multiple research teams studying 3I/Atalas. Dr. Rosita Kokotanakova from the European Southern Observatory submitted her analysis of 3I/Atalas's dust composition in late December 2024. The paper appeared in Astronomy and Astrophysics in August 2025, 8 months later. By publication, did anyone outside the specialised community care? No. Here's the devastating irony. The peer review system exists to ensure quality. It's science's safeguard against error, bias, and premature conclusions. It works. Papers that survive peer review are generally solid, reliable contributions to knowledge. The system succeeds at its intended purpose, but it fails catastrophically at a purpose nobody designed it for: timely communication with the public. Compare this to how information moves in other domains. A celebrity posts something controversial on social media. Within hours, news outlets cover it. Within days, think pieces and analysis flood the internet. The entire cycle, event reporting, analysis, public discourse, completes in less time than it takes a scientific paper to get assigned to reviewers. Can you see the fundamental mismatch? The world moves at internet speed. Science moves at peer review speed. And the gap between them is a chasm that swallows stories like 3I/Atlas whole. Some scientists tried to work around this. The preprint server Arxiv allows researchers to post papers before peer review, making findings immediately accessible. Several 3I/Atalas papers appeared on Arxiv months before their journal publication. Dr. Kwanzi Ye posted his analysis there in November 2024, but preprints carry a stigma. They're not peer-reviewed, so journalists hesitate to cover them. What if the findings don't hold up? Science communicators face the same hesitation, and the public, if they even know Arxiv exists, has no framework for evaluating which preprints are solid and which are speculative, so even the workaround doesn't really work. Meanwhile, there's another problem layered on top of the time delay: paywalls. Once a paper passes peer review and gets published, most journals lock it behind a subscription barrier. Nature charges $32 for a single article if you're not a subscriber. Science charges $30. Institutional subscriptions run tens of thousands of dollars annually. The research about 3I/Atalas, funded largely by public money through NASA, ESA, and national science foundations, became publicly inaccessible the moment it was published. You, the taxpayer who funded the research, have to pay again to read the results. Yes, there are workarounds. Many researchers post free versions on their personal websites or institutional repositories. Sites like Sci-Hub illegally bypass paywalls. But these solutions are fragmented, inconsistent, and require knowing they exist. The result? A citizen interested in 3I/Atalas in January 2025 could find conspiracy videos immediately and for free, but the actual scientific papers analysing real data, those required either institutional access, individual purchases, or knowing how to navigate grey market archives. What kind of system builds higher barriers around truth than around speculation? Dr. Michael Brown, the Caltech astronomer who discovered Eris and studies distant solar system objects, summarised this absurdity in a 2023 blog post. We've built a knowledge distribution system optimised for everything except distributing knowledge to the people who paid for it. And for 3I/Atlas, this meant that even when scientists had findings worth sharing, the infrastructure designed to share them ensured almost nobody would see them in time to care. Let's talk about what you did on December 19th, 2025. Not what you remember doing, what you actually did with your attention. You probably woke up and checked your phone within minutes. Maybe you scrolled through Instagram while drinking coffee. Watched a TikTok or three. Checked email. Glanced at news headlines. Maybe you saw something about a political controversy, a celebrity breakup, a sports highlight. You engaged with some of it, liked a post, shared an article, left a comment. Here's what you almost certainly didn't do. Stop to consider whether an interstellar object was making its closest approach to the sun that day. This isn't a criticism. It's an observation about how the attention economy actually functions, and understanding this economy is critical to understanding why 3I/Atlas vanished. The term attention economy was coined by psychologist Herbert Simon in 1971. His insight was simple but profound. In an information-rich world, attention becomes the scarce resource. Information is abundant, your attention is limited. Therefore, information must compete for your attention using the same principles that govern any market: supply, demand, and competition. What wins in this market? Not necessarily what's important, what's engaging. Engagement, in the digital context, has a precise meaning. It's measured in clicks, likes, shares, comments, and most importantly, time spent. When you pause your scrolling to watch a video, that's engagement. When you share an article, that's high-value engagement. when you simply scroll past something that's worthless in attention economy terms. Every major platform, Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, TikTok, Reddit, uses algorithms designed to maximize engagement. These algorithms learn, with frightening precision, what makes you stop scrolling. And they learn not just about you individually, but about millions of people collectively. They identify patterns,